He pressed his hands into her chest and counted out loud in the dark. Alone, trembling, refusing to stop, while a crowd of strangers stood 6 feet away and did absolutely nothing. No badge, no training, no reason to be there. Just a tired man who had already seen what happens when nobody acts fast enough. The title says he saved her life. What it doesn't tell you is what it cost him. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it before part 2. You'll understand why. Marcus Webb didn't think of himself as a good man or a bad man. He thought of himself as a tired man. 43 years old, broad shoulders worn down by 12-hour shifts at a steel fabrication plant on the south side of Chicago. Hands thick and cracked from years of work that didn't pay enough but paid something. And something had always been enough to keep the lights on and his son fed and the rent 3 weeks late instead of 2 months late. He drove a 2009 Ford F-150 with a cracked rear taillight he kept meaning to fix, and a pine tree air freshener that had stopped smelling like pine about 4 years ago. He wore the same 3 rotating flannels to work. He clocked in early and clocked out late, and never once asked for overtime pay because the supervisor, a pale, soft-handed man named Gerald, who'd never operated a single piece of machinery in his life, had a short memory when it came to things like that. Marcus didn't complain. He just remembered. He remembered everything. That was both his gift and the thing that quietly destroyed him at 2 a.m., when the apartment got too quiet, and the weight of it all pressed down on his chest like something alive. But on this particular Thursday night, November, the kind of cold that Chicago saves specifically to remind you it doesn't care about you, Marcus wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about pancakes. Specifically, he was thinking about the blue birthday candles he'd bought at the Walgreens on Michigan Avenue 3 days ago and had kept hidden in the glove compartment of the truck so his son wouldn't find them. He was thinking about the batter he'd already mixed and left in the refrigerator with a piece of plastic wrap over the bowl, waiting. He was thinking about the look on Deshaun's face, his son, 9 years old today, 9 years old at midnight, 9 years old in exactly 47 minutes, when he walked through the door and saw the candles and heard his father sing, badly and loudly and completely without shame, "Happy Birthday," in the empty kitchen of their 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor. He was thinking about that. Only that. He had parked the truck in the long-term lot at Millennium Station. The cheaper one, 3 blocks from the train. The one that cost $4 a day instead of $14. And he was walking fast, hands deep in his coat pockets, head down against the wind. The station lot connected through a concrete parking structure attached to a mid-rise office building, and Marcus cut through it every night on his way to the Red Line. It was faster, it was covered, and on a night like this, covered mattered. He was halfway through when he heard it. Not a scream, exactly. More like the sound a person makes when their body has stopped cooperating with their mind. A single, choked, airless sound, and then nothing. And the nothing was worse. Marcus stopped walking. He stood there for exactly 1 second, maybe 2. The kind of pause that a man takes when everything in him is calculating risk and reward and probability, and the 43 minutes left before midnight, and the candles in his glove compartment, and the batter in the refrigerator, and 6 years ago, hospital hallway. A nurse at a desk, not looking up. A doctor who said, "Give it a minute." A minute that became 4 minutes, that became the rest of his life. He turned around. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class, parked crookedly in a handicapped space near the far elevator bank. The engine was still running. Both rear windows were fogged from the inside. The hazard lights weren't on. Nothing was on. It looked, from 10 feet away, like a car with a tired driver catching a few minutes of sleep. Marcus wasn't 10 feet away anymore. He was at the driver's window in 3 steps, and through the glass, he could already see that something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. The woman in the driver's seat was not sleeping. She was slumped sideways toward the center console, her head tilted at a wrong angle, one hand frozen against the steering wheel, and the other fallen into her lap. Her face was gray, not pale, not white, but gray, the specific color that Marcus recognized from the worst night of his life. Her chest was not moving. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the door handle. It was unlocked. He pulled it open in one motion and reached in and put 2 fingers against the side of her neck and felt nothing. No, 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 no. He was already moving. He checked the back seat in less than a second. A collapsed wheelchair, folded and latched, stowed behind the driver's seat. He registered it without processing it. He reached in, released the seatbelt with one hand, and caught her weight with the other, and lowered her to the concrete floor of the parking garage, with a kind of care that didn't slow him down. Her name, he didn't know yet, was Katherine Ellison, 48 years old, CEO of Vantara Solutions, a medical technology company valued at roughly $1.4 billion. She had been paralyzed from the waist down since a car accident 11 years ago. She had driven herself, alone, to a late board meeting, and on the way back to the car, she had felt the familiar tightness in her chest that she had been told, by 4 different cardiologists, to take seriously. She had not taken it seriously. She had sat in her car for what she thought was 2 minutes, telling herself it was stress, telling herself it would pass, telling herself she didn't need anyone's help. Because Katherine Ellison had spent 11 years building a life on the specific architecture of not needing anyone's help. And then her heart had stopped. She did not know any of this was happening. She was not there anymore, not in any way that counted. But Marcus was. He put the heel of his hand over her sternum, locked his fingers together, straightened his elbows, and pushed. 1, 2, 3, 4. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. Low, steady. The counting of a man who has made a decision and will not be talked out of it. 5, 6, 7. Hey man, what are you doing? The security guard, young, early 20s, heavy jacket with a logo Marcus didn't look at, came running from the direction of the elevator bank. His hand was already moving toward his radio. Sir, stop! You need to— Call 911. Marcus didn't look up. Right now. Not in 30 seconds. Now. Sir, I'm going to need you to— Call 911. His voice cracked the air like something physical. She has no pulse. I need you to call 911, and I need you to find an AED. Do you know what an AED is? The guard stopped. It's a defibrillator, a red box, usually near the elevator, near the stairwell. Go find it. Go now. And you— He glanced up for half a second at the 3 people standing 20 feet back, phones already raised, doing exactly what people do. You with the phone, stop recording and call 911 from your own phone. If she dies and you have video instead of a call log, you're going to carry that forever. Your choice. One of the bystanders lowered her phone. She hesitated. Call, Marcus said, and went back to counting. 16, 17, 18. The security guard, to his credit, ran. The woman with the phone made the call. Marcus heard her voice behind him, shaking, giving the address wrong twice before getting it right. He kept his hands on Katherine Ellison's chest, and he counted, and he breathed. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. The ratio drilled into him, Not from a class he'd taken, but from a night 6 years ago, when a paramedic had looked at him in a waiting room and said, "If you'd known CPR, it might have been different." Might have been. Marcus had gone home that night and bought a mannequin off Amazon with the last $40 in his checking account. He had practiced in his living room for 2 weeks until his arms ached and his son had started trying to imitate him on the couch cushions. He had taken the free certification course at the library. He had recertified every 2 years since. Not because he thought he'd ever use it, because he needed to know it existed. He needed to know the knowledge was there, sitting in his hands, waiting, just in case he ever found himself in a parking garage at 11:14 p.m. with someone dying on cold concrete in front of him. 29. 30. He tilted her chin, pinched her nose, breathed twice, watching for the chest rise. Nothing. "Come on," he said quietly. Not a plea exactly, more like an instruction. "Come on, you don't get to stop yet." He started again. The security guard came back at a run, AED box in both hands, breathing hard. "I found it. I don't know how to—" "Give it to me." Marcus took it without breaking his rhythm, ripped the case open with one hand, kept his other hand on her chest. "Turn it on, the button on the top." The guard fumbled. The machine beeped to life. "Remove all clothing from the patient's chest," the automated voice instructed. "Attach pads as shown in the diagram." "Do you need me to—" the guard started. "I've got it." Marcus kept his voice flat and controlled, the way he kept his voice when the machinery at the plant was failing, and the new guys were starting to panic, and someone had to be the one who didn't. "Hold the pads. Don't let them touch each other." He positioned them. The machine processed. The voice counted down. "Stand clear. Analyzing rhythm. Do not touch the patient." Marcus sat back on his heels. His arms were shaking. He'd been at it for almost 3 minutes, and 3 minutes of proper CPR on cold concrete felt like an hour. He looked at her face, gray and still and so completely absent, and he thought of a number of things simultaneously. Deshawn at home asleep, the candles in the glove compartment, the batter in the refrigerator, the particular way the silence of a hospital room sounds when a monitor flatlines and no one moves fast enough, the way a life can end in the space between someone deciding to act and someone deciding to wait. "Shock advised, stand clear, delivering shock in 3, 2, 1. Her body jerked. The guard made a sound. Marcus was back on her chest before she'd stopped moving. 1, 2, 3. The crowd had grown. He didn't know when. 12, 15 people now, arranged in a semicircle at a respectful, or maybe just cautious, distance. Some with phones up, some just standing, arms at their sides, faces doing the complicated thing that human faces do when they're watching something they don't know how to process. Nobody came closer. Nobody offered to help. Marcus understood this in an abstract, distant way. He didn't resent it. He was too busy to resent it. There was a kind of tunnel vision that set in after the first minute of CPR. The world collapsed down to his hands and her chest, and the count, and the next breath, and the next compression, and the count again, and everything outside that tunnel became noise. But then a voice cut through. "Is she—" A man somewhere behind him, older. "Is she going to make it?" Marcus didn't answer. Hey, I'm talking to you, man. Do you even know what you're doing? She might have a spinal injury. You could be making it—" "Shut up." Marcus said it without turning around, without breaking rhythm, without emotion. The way you say something when you don't have the bandwidth for anything else. "If you're not calling 911 or getting me something useful, shut up." Silence. 22. 23. The second shock stopped her heart for a full 4 seconds. Marcus knew it. He could feel it in the absence. His hands were on her chest, and there was nothing underneath them. Not even the faint electrical quiver of a struggling heart. Just stillness. 4 seconds is not a long time. 4 seconds is an eternity when it's measured in the space between a person being alive and the person not being alive. He pushed harder, faster than the rhythm called for, and then forced himself back to pace, because pace mattered, because he practiced this, because the whole point of the 2 weeks in the living room with a $40 mannequin was that when this moment came, his hands would know what to do, even when his brain was somewhere else entirely. His brain was thinking, strangely, of Deshawn's face the morning after Marcus's wife Nia had died. The way his son had walked into the kitchen at 6 years old expecting breakfast and found his father sitting at the table with both hands flat on the surface, staring at nothing. The way Deshawn had put his small hand over his father's hand and said simply, "I'm hungry, Daddy." And how that had been the thing, that small, unadorned sentence, that had pulled Marcus back into the world. "I'm hungry. There are still things to do. Come back." He came back. He kept going. 15. 16. The third shock fired at 11:21 p.m. And this time, there was something. Not a gasp. Not the dramatic, movie-ready inhale that people imagine. Something smaller and more fragile than that. A flutter, almost. A shudder. The chest moved, slightly, independently of his compressions. Her mouth opened by a fraction of an inch. Marcus froze. He put his fingers to her neck. He held his breath. And then he felt it. Faint, irregular, uncertain, like a radio signal coming in through static, but there, unmistakably there. He exhaled, one long, slow breath, the kind that empties you completely. "She's got a pulse," he said. Not loudly, not to anyone in particular, just because it needed to be said out loud, in the air, as proof. Behind him, he heard someone start to cry. He sat back on his heels and looked at his hands. The skin across his knuckles was torn, scraped raw against the concrete. His shoulders felt like something had been unpacked and repacked incorrectly. His chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with the physical, and everything to do with the particular exhaustion of caring when you have nothing left to give. He looked at Katherine Ellison. She was breathing. Shallow, irregular breathing, but breathing. He looked at her face, really looked at it for the first time, and saw the lines around her eyes that told him she was probably in her late 40s. The professional makeup, largely intact despite everything. The diamond earrings that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The expensive coat, now ruined against the concrete. She was a stranger. He knew absolutely nothing about her. He had just given her back everything. The sirens came at 11:24. 2 paramedics hit the ground running, equipment cases clanking, and Marcus stood up and stepped back. Straight back. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. And simply made room. The way you do when the professionals arrive. The way you do when your part is finished. "Sir, are you with her? Are you the one who—" The first paramedic, a woman in her 30s, was already on her knees beside Katherine, reading the AED display, pressing her own fingers to the pulse point. She looked up at Marcus with an expression that was somewhere between professional assessment and genuine shock. "She was in the car," Marcus said. "No pulse when I found her. I started CPR, maybe 4 minutes, 4.5. AED shocked her 3 times. She got a pulse back about 2 minutes ago." "You did all this yourself?" The guard helped with the AED. The paramedic looked at him for a moment, really looked at him, the way people rarely do in emergency situations. "You did good," she said. "You did real good." Marcus nodded. He put his hands in his pockets. He checked his watch. 11:26 p.m. Deshawn would still be awake. 9-year-olds on their birthdays don't sleep on time, especially not when their father has promised pancakes. He was probably lying in the dark right now, phone on his chest. They'd allowed 1 hour of screen time before bed, and Deshawn spent 45 minutes of it most nights, texting Marcus updates on exactly how awake he still was. "Dad, I'm still awake. Dad, it's been 20 minutes. Dad, are you almost home?" Marcus looked at the woman on the concrete floor, at the paramedics working efficiently around her, at the oxygen mask going over her face, at the faint, impossible rise and fall of her chest, and he felt something that he couldn't have named. Not pride, not relief exactly, something older and quieter than either of those things. He turned around. "Hey!" The security guard jogged toward him. "Hey, man, wait! Where are you going?" "The police are going to want to—" "I need to get home," Marcus said. "But they're going to need your information. For the report, I need to get home." He said it the second time, not as an explanation, but as a statement of fact. The way you say the sun is up or the road is wet. Something that simply was. "She's alive. She's got people with her now. I need to get home." The guard stared at him. "You just—" He gestured behind him, at the scene, at the ambulance pulling into the garage now, at the woman alive on the concrete floor. "You just saved someone's life." "Yeah," Marcus said. He pulled his coat tighter. "I really need to get home." He walked out of the parking structure and into the Chicago cold, and he didn't look back. His hands were shaking inside his pockets. But that happens sometimes. His right shoulder was going to hurt tomorrow, and the next day, and probably the one after that. But that also happens sometimes. His eyes felt dry and strange, the way they always did when he'd been in a tunnel for a long time and come back out into regular light. He took the stairs down to the Red Line platform. He swiped his transit card. He stood on the platform with his hands in his pockets and stared at the orange line that indicated an inbound train in 4 minutes. And he thought about nothing at all for the first time all night. The train arrived. He got on. He found a seat near the door, sat down heavily, and pulled out his phone. 7 texts from Deshawn. "Dad, I'm staying up. Dad, you said midnight. Dad, it's 11:11. Make a wish, LOL. Dad, is everything okay? Dad, 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 I'm scared. Please text me." Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he typed, "I'm on the train. I'm coming. Start getting out the plates." The reply came in 12 seconds. "Yes! Hurry up!" He put the phone in his pocket. Outside the train window, the city moved past in lights and dark water, and the particular beautiful ugliness of Chicago at night. All brick and beam and cold and color. All that enormous American life stacked up 60 stories high and spread out for 40 miles in every direction. Somewhere in a parking garage behind him, a woman he didn't know was breathing. Somewhere ahead of him, a boy who was now 9 years old was pulling plates out of a cabinet. The train moved. Marcus Webb rode it home. He didn't tell Deshawn what had happened. Not that night. He walked in at 11:43, coat still on, and his son hit him at approximately knee level, arms around his waist, face buried in his coat. And Marcus stood in the doorway of their apartment and put one hand on the back of his son's head and held him there for a moment longer than Deshawn probably expected. "Happy birthday, man," he said quietly. Deshawn pulled back and looked up at him with the specific expression of a 9-year-old who has decided in this moment that his father is being weird, but a kind of weird that is allowed. "Dad, your hands are all messed up." Marcus looked at his knuckles. "Caught him on something." "Does it hurt?" "Nah." "You sure?" "I'm sure." He stepped inside and kicked the door shut behind him. "Go get the syrup. I'm not eating pancakes without syrup." "We have the kind with the lady on the bottle and the kind with the map of Vermont," Deshawn announced, already moving toward the kitchen with the authority of someone who has been planning this for hours. "I couldn't decide which one you'd want, so I got both out already." "Good man." Marcus took his coat off, hung it by the door, stood in the hallway for just a moment, alone, in the small, ordinary silence of his apartment. The smell of it, the particular quiet of it, the way it held him without asking anything from him. Then he walked into the kitchen. "All right," he said. "Let's make some pancakes." In the parking garage on Millennium Drive, a paramedic named Rosa Medina was filling out her incident report at 11:52 p.m. She had been doing this job for 11 years, and she had seen a lot. But she kept stopping at the same line in the form, the one that said, "Bystander CPR administered prior to EMS arrival." And she kept thinking about the man with the torn-up hands who had looked at the clock and said, "I really need to get home." She asked the security guard his name. The guard shook his head. He never said. Rosa looked at the woman on the stretcher, stable, breathing, alive, and then at the empty space on the concrete floor where a stranger had knelt in the dark and decided to stay. She wrote in her report, "Unknown male, approximately 40s, performed CPR for estimated 4 to 5 minutes. 3 AED applications. Achieved ROSC prior to EMS arrival. Departed scene before identification could be obtained." She looked at that last line for a long time. Then she closed the folder and got back to work. The pancakes were good. Deshawn ate 3.5 and declared himself full in the way only children can, sudden and absolute, as if someone had flipped a switch. Marcus ate too, standing at the counter because he was too tired to sit down properly, and drank a glass of water and watched his son fall asleep at the kitchen table with his face in his arms at 12:32 in the morning, one birthday candle still burning in the center of the stack they hadn't gotten around to lighting all at once. He carried Deshawn to his room, pulled the blanket up, stood in the doorway for a moment in the dark. Then he went to the bathroom, ran the cold water, and held both hands under it for a long time. The knuckles were worse than he'd thought. The skin was scraped off across 3 fingers on his right hand and 2 on his left. Concrete burned in the raw, specific way that doesn't bleed much, but doesn't stop hurting either. He dried them carefully, found some gauze in the medicine cabinet, and wrapped them loosely. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to keep his shirt from catching on the torn skin. He looked at himself in the mirror for a moment. He looked tired. He always looked tired. He turned the light off and went to bed. He slept without dreaming, which was unusual. Normally, there were dreams. He did not dream about the parking garage. He did not dream about her gray face, or the AED, or the count. He did not dream about the 4 seconds when there had been nothing underneath his hands but stillness. He just slept, deep and dark and complete, the way the body sleeps when it has been pushed to the absolute edge of what it can do and has come back. His alarm went off at 5:45. He silenced it before it could wake Deshawn. Swung his legs over the side of the bed, put his feet on the floor. Sat there for 30 seconds in the dark of a Friday morning, shoulders aching in exactly the way he'd predicted, and then stood up and started the coffee and began the ordinary machinery of his day. He did not check the news. He did not have reason to. By 8 o'clock Friday morning, the story was already moving. It started the way most things start now, with a phone. Specifically with the phone of a 26-year-old named Jordan Reeves, who had been walking to his car in the Millennium Station lot on Thursday night and had stopped, like everyone else, and unlike everyone else, had kept recording all the way through. He'd captured 47 seconds of usable footage. Not the whole thing. The angle was wrong and the light was bad. But enough. Enough to see the shape of a large man on his knees on concrete, rhythmically, relentlessly working. Enough to see the AED. Enough to hear, faintly but unmistakably, the counting. Jordan had posted it at 1:15 a.m. with the caption, "Witnessed a random guy perform CPR on a woman in a parking garage tonight, and she made it. He left before the ambulance even got her loaded. Nobody knows who he is. Chicago, you wild." By 8 Friday morning, it had 400,000 views. By noon, it had crossed 2 million. By the time Marcus Webb was clocking out of his Friday shift, pulling on his coat in the break room while Gerald lectured someone about safety protocols in the background, the video had been shared by 3 local news stations, 1 national morning show, and a Chicago Tribune reporter named Alicia Park, who had already made 2 phone calls to Millennium Station security and was currently on hold with the Chicago Fire Department. Marcus's phone had not received a single call about any of this. Because nobody knew his name. Because nobody had written it down. He drove home, stopped at the grocery store for milk and bread and the orange juice Deshaun liked, and made dinner. Katherine Ellison woke up in Northwestern Memorial Hospital at 9:47 Friday morning. She woke up the way people wake up after cardiac events. Not all at once, but in pieces, the consciousness assembling itself slowly and unevenly, like a building being reconstructed from the inside. First there was light, then there was sound, then there was pain. Not sharp, not localized, just a general deep soreness in her chest that told her, even before she fully understood where she was, that something had happened to her heart. Her assistant, Priya, was in the chair beside the bed. She had been there since 2 in the morning. She was asleep with her phone in her hand and a cold cup of coffee on the table beside her. And when Catherine's eyes opened and stayed open, it was a nurse doing routine checks who noticed first. "Ms. Ellison, can you hear me?" "Yes." Her voice came out wrong, thin and scraped, like it had been borrowed from someone else. "Do you know where you are?" "Hospital." She tried to turn her head. Everything resisted. "What happened?" "You experienced a cardiac event last night in the Millennium Station parking structure. Your heart stopped. Someone found you and performed CPR until EMS arrived." The nurse kept her voice even and clinical, but her eyes were doing something different. "You're very lucky." Katherine processed this with the methodical efficiency of a woman who had spent 20 years making decisions under pressure. Her heart had stopped. Someone had found her. CPR. She was alive. "Who?" she said. "I'm sorry? Who found me?" The nurse paused. "We don't have that information yet, Ms. Ellison. The individual left the scene before—" "He left?" "Yes." Katherine stared at the ceiling. She was aware, distantly, of the monitors attached to her, of the IV in her left arm, of the particular institutional stillness of a hospital room in the morning. She was aware of her own chest rising and falling, the ordinary miracle of it, the thing she had taken for granted for 48 years and would likely never take for granted again. Someone had made that happen. Someone had stopped what they were doing in a parking garage at midnight in November and had kept her alive with their bare hands, and had then walked away without leaving a name. "Find out who it was," she said. Priya woke up at the sound of her voice. "Katherine! Oh, thank God!" "Priya," Katherine turned her head slowly. I need you to find out who saved my life last night. Priya blinked, looked at the nurse, looked back. Okay, yes, I'll start making calls. Now. You just woke up. Priya, her voice was still thin, still borrowed, but the authority in it had come back completely. Now. Marcus found out about the video on Saturday. Not from the news, not from a coworker, from Deshawn, who came running into the kitchen at 10 in the morning with his tablet held out and said, Dad, look at this. There's this video going crazy everywhere about this guy who did CPR on someone in a parking garage. Like the same garage where you park. And they don't know who he is. Dad, look! Marcus wiped his hands on a dish towel and looked at the tablet. The footage was bad. Grainy, low angle, the way everything looks at night in a parking structure. But he could see the shape of his own back, the width of his shoulders, his coat. He could hear his own voice counting, faint and distorted, but unmistakable to him. He watched for about 10 seconds. Then he handed the tablet back to Deshawn and turned back to the sink. Huh, he said. Deshawn stared at him. That's it? Huh? He looked at the video, looked at his father's back. Dad! What? Dad, that's you! I don't know what you're talking about. Dad, I can literally... Deshawn pulled up the video again, squinting at it. Your coat. That's your Friday coat. You wear that coat every Thursday and Friday because you said the gray one needs to go to the... Deshawn. Dad! Marcus turned around. His expression was the one Deshawn privately called the serious face. Not angry, not stern, just very, very still. The face his father made when something was real and required full attention. That video is going to stay on the internet, Marcus said. That's fine. People can talk about whatever they want to talk about. He picked up the dish towel again. But our phone number isn't going to change, and our address isn't going to get posted anywhere, and we are not calling any news stations. You understand me? Deshawn was quiet for a moment. Why not? Marcus considered the question. He gave it the respect it deserved, because Deshawn was 9 and asked good questions and deserved real answers. Because I didn't do it for a camera, he said finally. I did it because it needed to be done. That's all. He paused. There's no story there, man. I did what any person should do. That's not special. That's just basic. Deshawn looked at his father for a long moment, with the particular expression of a child who suspects the adult is wrong, but doesn't yet have the words to explain why. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, Marcus agreed. Now go put some shoes on. We're going to the laundromat. The Tribune ran the story Sunday morning. Alicia Park had done her work well. She had security camera footage requests, statements from 2 bystanders, a comment from the paramedic on scene. Rosa Medina had described, carefully and professionally, what she had found when EMS arrived, which was a woman alive who should not have been alive. She had the location, the timeline, the AED log. She had, from a hospital spokesperson, confirmation that Katherine Ellison, CEO of Vantara Solutions, identity now released with her consent, was recovering and had publicly stated that she owed her life to an unknown bystander. What Alicia Park did not have was a name. The headline ran, "He saved her life, then walked away. Chicago wants to know who he is." By Monday morning, that headline had been picked up nationally. The Today Show ran a segment. A Chicago radio host offered $10,000 to anyone with information leading to the identity of the man in the parking garage. Vantara Solutions' corporate communications office released a formal statement from Katherine Ellison herself. I am alive because a stranger chose to stay. I would very much like the opportunity to thank him in person. Marcus read that statement on his lunch break, on his phone, in the break room at the plant, while Gerald microwaved something that smelled aggressively of fish. He put his phone back in his pocket and finished his sandwich. Gerald looked at him. "You hear about this thing? Woman in a parking garage, some guy saved her life?" "I heard something about it," Marcus said. "Crazy, right? She's some billionaire, CEO of some tech company, and this guy just, poof, gone." Gerald shook his head. "I'd have been at that press conference so fast. You know how much money that woman has?" "Yeah," Marcus said, standing up and balling his paper bag. "I figured." He went back to work. The call started reaching Marcus's general orbit on Tuesday. Not directly, nobody had his number, but his coworker James had seen the video on the news and had mentioned, casually, in the locker room, that the coat looked kind of like Marcus's Friday coat. And another coworker, a man named Terry, who meant well and had no filter, had pulled up the video on his phone and held it up next to Marcus's face and said, "Nah, that's definitely you, man. Look at the shoulders." Marcus took Terry's phone gently out of his hand, handed it back to him and said, very quietly, "Terry, I'm asking you as a friend. Let it go." Terry looked at him for a long moment. Terry was 51 years old, had worked at the plant for 20 years, and had known Marcus long enough to understand that the quiet voice meant more than a loud one ever would. "All right," Terry said. "All right, man. It's let go." But the thing about stories is that they move on their own. On Wednesday, the security guard who had run for the AED, his name was Darius, 22 years old, first month on the job, gave an interview to a local news crew. He didn't mean any harm by it. He was 22, and it was the most significant thing that had ever happened to him. And a reporter had asked, and he'd answered. He described the man. Black, probably early 40s, big, wore a heavy flannel under his coat. Drove or parked in the long-term structure regularly, based on how fast he'd moved through it. Knew what he was doing with the AED without hesitation. He didn't have a name, but he had details. And details, once they're in the air, find their way. Thursday night, 1 week after it had happened, Marcus's upstairs neighbor Sandra knocked on his door. She was 70 years old and had lived in the building since before Marcus was born and brought him food sometimes, which he accepted because refusing would have hurt her feelings, and because she was an excellent cook. She was not carrying food tonight. She was carrying her phone. "Marcus," she said, and her voice had a quality to it that he recognized. Careful, tender, the way people sound when they're about to say something they're not sure how to say. "Honey, this is you." She turned the phone so he could see. It was a news clip. Someone had done the work, cross-referenced the AED registration at the garage, the long-term parking permit database, something. He didn't know what. And there was his name. Not with a photo, not yet, but his name. Marcus Webb, 43, a steel worker on Chicago's South Side, has been identified by multiple sources as the man in the viral parking garage video. He looked at the screen. He looked at Sandra. "Is it?" she asked softly. He didn't insult her by line. Sandra had known him for 11 years. She had been the one who'd watched Deshawn when Nia was in the hospital that last week. She had been the one who'd left a casserole dish outside his door every other day for the first month after. She knew his face. She knew his hands. She had known, probably, since the video first started circulating. "Yeah," he said. She exhaled. It wasn't quite a sob, but it was close. She pressed her hand against her own sternum briefly, the way older people sometimes do when emotion arrives without warning. "Marcus." "Sandra, you could have just kept walking," she said. "You know that? Most people would have." "I know." "But you didn't." "I know." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were wet. "You're Nia," she said softly. She would be so proud of you." He stood very still in the doorway of his apartment. The television was on in the background. Deshawn watching something before bed, the smell of their dinner still in the air. The ordinary evening of their ordinary life, suddenly trembling slightly at its edges, like something that has been held up for a long time and is just now being asked to hold more weight. He put his hand over Sandra's hand. "Thank you," he said, "for saying that." She patted his hand. She went back upstairs. Marcus closed the door, stood in his own hallway, heard Deshawn in the living room, laughing at whatever he was watching. The specific, unself-conscious laugh of a 9-year-old who has no idea that the world outside their door is starting to point in their direction. He walked to the window, looked out at the street below, the parked cars, the yellow streetlights, the ordinary Thursday life of a South Side Chicago block. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. He turned it over. 12 notifications. News outlets. People he hadn't spoken to in years. An area code he didn't recognize. He set it face down on the windowsill. He went and sat on the couch next to his son. "What are we watching?" he asked. Deshawn pulled the blanket over both of them without looking up. "Nature documentary. There's this octopus, Dad. It's insane. It can change its color and its texture." "Yeah? And it has 3 hearts." Deshawn turned to look at his father with the full beam intensity he reserved for things that genuinely astonished him. "3 hearts, Dad? Why does it need 3? Marcus looked at his son's face, the wide eyes, the certainty that this information was important and worth sharing, and that his father, specifically, should know about it. "I don't know," Marcus said. "That's what I said." Deshawn turned back to the screen. "Maybe one's for backup." Marcus sat with that for a moment. "Maybe," he said quietly. "That's not a bad idea." Outside, the city moved. The phones buzzed. The story gathered itself into something larger than any single person had intended. Inside apartment 3C on the south side of Chicago, a man and his 9-year-old son watched an octopus change color in the deep, dark water and said nothing at all. And the silence between them was the most peaceful thing in the world. The name hit the internet like a stone dropped into still water, and then the rings spread out fast and wide and didn't stop. By Friday morning, Marcus Webb was the most searched name in Chicago. By Friday afternoon, it had gone national. People found his workplace within hours. Someone cross-referenced the steel fabrication plants on the south side with what little physical description Darius the security guard had given. And it didn't take long. Someone posted the plant's address. Someone else posted a general neighborhood. The comment sections filled up with people who meant well, and people who didn't, and people who were simply attracted to the heat of a story without caring much about the person at the center of it. Marcus found out about the workplace posting the way he found out about most things he didn't want to know, from Terry. Terry appeared at his station at 7:45 Friday morning, phone already out, already talking before Marcus had fully clocked in. "They got the plant, man. Address is up on like 4 different sites. Gerald's losing his mind. There's already 2 news vans parked outside on the street." Marcus set down his coffee. "How many?" "2 I saw. Might be more by now." Terry lowered his voice. "Marcus, listen. Maybe you should just talk to them. Get it over with. 1 interview, say thanks and all that, and they move on. That's how it works, right?" "That's not how it works," Marcus said. "How do you know?" "Because the story isn't me doing 1 interview and them being satisfied." He picked his coffee back up. "The story is me. Whatever I say, whatever I do, they keep coming back for more. That's the job. That's what they need." He took a sip. "I'm not the story. I'm just the hook." Terry thought about this. "That's pretty cynical." "That's pretty accurate," Marcus said, and went to work. Gerald came to find him at 9. Gerald was sweating, which was not unusual, but he was sweating in a specific, upper management panic way that Marcus recognized as meaning someone above Gerald had already made a phone call. Marcus. He pulled him to the side of the floor, away from the noise. There are reporters outside. I've had 3 calls this morning. One from corporate, one from a Tribune reporter, one from somebody's publicist I don't even know. I'm not doing interviews, Gerald. Marcus, I'm not doing interviews. I'm here to work. He held Gerald's gaze. Is there a problem with my work? Gerald opened his mouth, closed it. No, he said finally. No, your work is fine. Then we're good. Gerald stood there for a moment in the specific, helpless discomfort of a man who has been asked to handle something that is genuinely outside his skill set. The company PR team wants to put out a statement about That's between you and them, Marcus said. My name doesn't go in it. Marcus. Gerald. He kept his voice patient, the way he'd learned to keep it with Gerald. Not threatening, not aggressive, just immovable. The way a wall is not aggressive. It simply does not move. My name doesn't go in it. Gerald went back to his office. The PR statement went out later that day without Marcus's name. It said that a valued member of their team had recently demonstrated extraordinary character and that the company was proud to employ people of such caliber. It was, Marcus thought when Terry showed it to him at lunch, the most perfectly useless paragraph he had ever read. He managed to get out through the loading dock at the end of his shift. One of the news vans was still on the street, engine running. He saw it from the corner of the building and took the long way around to the lot where he'd parked the truck, walking through the alley behind the hardware supply next door, head down, collar up. He felt, doing this, a specific kind of absurdity. A grown man ducking through alleys to avoid cameras because he'd done something decent. He wanted to laugh at it. He almost did. He got to the truck, got in, sat for a second. His phone had 41 missed calls. He didn't recognize most of the numbers. Area codes from New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta. One from Washington, D.C. He scrolled through them without calling any back, the way you might page through a book in a language you don't speak, absorbing the shape of it without taking in the meaning. There was one he did recognize. Sandra's number. He called her back. They came to the building, she said before he could speak. A camera crew. They were in the lobby. I told them you weren't home and they'd need to leave the property. You okay? I'm fine. I'm 70 years old, Marcus. I've handled worse than a camera crew. Her voice was steady, but underneath it he heard something else. A tightness, a protectiveness that she was keeping in check. Deshaun gets out of school at 3. I'm going to pick him up. Don't argue. He hadn't been planning to argue. Thank you, Sandra. Don't thank me. Just tell me one thing. What? Are you all right? He thought about the question seriously, the way Sandra always made him think about questions seriously, because she asked them that way. He was physically sore. His shoulder still ached. His hands were scabbing over under the loose gauze he'd rewrapped that morning. He was tired in a way that sleep wasn't going to fix, the particular bone-deep tired of a man who has spent a week being pulled between his private life and something much larger than him that he didn't ask for. I'm all right, he said. Okay, Sandra said. Then come home. He found Deshaun at Sandra's kitchen table doing homework when he got back. The boy looked up when Marcus came in, and his face did something complicated. Relief and something else, something older. A worry that a 9-year-old shouldn't have to carry. There were people outside school, Deshaun said. Marcus sat down across from him. I know, Sandra told me. They had cameras. My friend Jalen said one of them asked him if he knew me. Deshaun's pen was still in his hand. He wasn't writing. Dad, what's happening? People found out my name, Marcus said simply. From the video. They want to talk to me about it. Are you going to? No. Deshawn considered this. He was 9, but he thought about things the way Marcus thought about things. He turned them over, looked at all the sides, and then arrived at a conclusion with a certain quiet solidity. It was Nia's way of thinking, and every time Marcus saw it in Deshawn, it hit him in the chest with a specific sweetness that never quite became comfortable. Is it because of Mom? Deshawn asked. The question sat between them. Marcus didn't look away from his son. What do you mean? I mean, Deshawn put the pen down. You always say Mom died because nobody moved fast enough. So you learned CPR, so you'd know what to do. He paused. So was it because of her that you went back? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. It was because of her. Deshawn nodded slowly. Not like the answer surprised him. More like it confirmed something he'd already half known. Do you think she knows? Like, wherever she is. Do you think she knows you did it? The question was so direct and so open that it bypassed every defense Marcus had. He sat with it in the honest way it deserved. I think, he said carefully, that if she's anywhere, she knows. Deshawn picked his pen back up. Good, he said simply, and went back to his homework. Marcus sat at Sandra's table for a while longer and didn't say anything. And Sandra moved quietly around her kitchen making tea, and no one spoke. And the silence was the good kind. Katherine Ellison was discharged from Northwestern Memorial on Saturday afternoon. She had spent 4 days arguing with her doctors, which her cardiologist, Dr. Petrov, described privately as entirely consistent with her character. She had also spent 4 days directing Priya, by phone, by text, and once by sending a formal written memo from her hospital bed to find the man who had saved her life. They had a name now. Marcus Webb, 43, South Side, steel fabrication plant, single father. She had all of this on a document that Priya had prepared, thorough and organized, the way Priya prepared everything. And she had read it 3 times in the hospital and was reading it again now in the back of the car, taking her home. Her wheelchair folded in the trunk, her chest still sore in ways that the doctors had told her would improve over the next 6 to 8 weeks. He hasn't responded to any outreach? She said. Priya, in the seat beside her, shook her head. No contact information is publicly available. The plant's PR office said they can pass along a message, but can't share his personal information. Obviously. Katherine looked out the window. What do we know about him? Not the logistics. Him. Priya hesitated. His wife died 6 years ago. Cardiac event. He had a young son. The son would be 9 now. He's been at the plant for 7 years. By all accounts, he's... She paused, choosing words. He's private. Keeps to himself. No social media presence. None at all? None. Katherine absorbed this. He lost his wife to a cardiac event, she said quietly. Yes. And then, 6 years later, he's in a parking garage performing CPR on a stranger. She closed the document. He didn't leave because he was modest, Priya. He left because he had somewhere to be. Priya didn't respond to this. She recognized when Katherine was thinking out loud and when she was asking a question. And this was thinking out loud. He could have let me die, Katherine said. He had every reason to keep walking. He had a son waiting for him. He had... She stopped. Most people would have kept walking. But he didn't. No, she said. He didn't. She looked back at the document. Set up a formal introduction. Through the plant if we have to. I want to meet him. Not for the press. I want the press nowhere near it. Just, I want to meet him. Priya made a note. And if he says no? Katherine was quiet for a moment. Then I respect that, she said, and I find another way to thank him. The message reached Marcus on Monday, not through Gerald in the end, through Terry, who had somehow become the unlikely intermediary in all of this, who appeared at Marcus's station at 10 in the morning with a folded piece of paper, like a man delivering something fragile. Plant manager got a call, Terry said, from her office, the CEO lady. He held out the paper. She's asking if you'd be willing to meet. She says, and this is a direct quote, they made sure to pass it exact. She says, no cameras, no press, no strings, just a conversation. He paused. They said whenever and wherever you want, totally on your terms. Marcus took the paper, read it. It was short, 4 sentences, professional. The kind of thing written by someone who knew how to communicate clearly under pressure. At the bottom, handwritten in different ink from the rest, were 4 additional words that had clearly been added after the typed message had been prepared. Please, I just want to say thank you. He folded the paper in half. Terry was watching him with barely contained anticipation. So, what are you going to do? Marcus put the paper in his pocket, picked up his work gloves. I'll think about it. Marcus, I'll think about it, Terry. He thought about it for 3 days. He thought about it while he worked, and while he cooked dinner, and while he sat on the couch next to Deshawn, watching nature documentaries about animals that had no idea the world was chaotic and strange and full of consequences. He thought about what it would mean to go and what it would mean to stay away. He thought about Nia, who had been alive and then had not been, and about the particular understanding that experience had given him, that the person left behind carries not just the grief, but the unfinished business of it, the things they never got to say. He thought about Katherine Ellison in a hospital bed, alive, with unfinished business of her own. On Wednesday evening, he called the number on the paper. A woman answered. Priya, he would later understand. Mr. Webb? Her voice was carefully neutral, the careful neutral of someone who had been told to be very careful. Thank you for calling. Tell her Saturday morning, he said. Not her office, not somewhere public. There's a diner on 51st, Mavis's, 8 o'clock. A pause. I'll confirm with Ms. Ellison immediately. Can I? That's all I need to say for now, Marcus said. She can come alone or with one person. That's it. Another pause, shorter. Understood. We'll be there. He hung up. He sat at his kitchen table in the quiet of a Wednesday night. Deshawn was in his room. The apartment smelled like the chili Marcus had made, the good kind, with the dried chilies he bought from the Mexican grocery 2 blocks over. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street below. He thought about the 4 handwritten words at the bottom of that note. Please, I just want to say thank you. He thought about how much it must have cost someone like her to write please to someone like him. How she'd added it after the typed part was done, picked up a different pen, and written it anyway. He understood something about that. About the things you do after the official version of yourself has already said its piece. He got up, washed the dishes, checked on Deshawn, turned off the lights. Saturday morning came the way Saturday mornings always came, gray and unhurried, the city quieter, the particular quality of winter light that made Chicago look both smaller and more honest than it did the rest of the week. Marcus got to Mavis's diner at 7:50. He always arrived early. It was habit. A factory habit. A life habit. The habit of a man who had learned that being early meant you controlled the room, even if the room was just a corner booth in a diner on 51st Street, where Mavis herself was already behind the counter at 7:50, pouring coffee into white mugs without being asked, because she had been pouring coffee into white mugs for 30 years, and she knew a man who needed coffee when she saw one. "You eating?" she said. "Just coffee for now. I'm meeting someone." Mavis filled his mug and moved on without ceremony, the way Mavis always moved, with the elegant efficiency of a woman who understood that her job was to make people comfortable without making them feel observed. Marcus sat in the corner booth, facing the door. He wrapped both hands around the mug. His knuckles were healing. The scrapes had closed over, the skin still tender, but no longer raw. He looked at his own hands for a moment, the hands that had done the thing. They looked like his hands. They looked exactly like they always had. The door opened at 7:58. Katherine Ellison came through in her wheelchair, Priya behind her. She was in a coat he didn't recognize. Dark wool, clean lines. The kind of coat that cost what it cost, and you could tell. Her hair was pulled back. She looked, he thought, like someone who had recently been through something significant and was operating at about 70% of their usual capacity and was refusing to let it show. She saw him. Across the diner, across the distance, her eyes found his and stayed there. He didn't stand, not because he was being rude, but because standing felt like the wrong gesture for what this was. Instead, he nodded. Once. Simple and direct. She nodded back. She came across the diner with a steadiness that told him the wheelchair was something she'd been living with long enough that it was just part of how she moved. Not a statement or an obstacle, just a fact. Priya stayed near the door. Katherine pulled up to the table and looked at Marcus Webb. Really looked at him, the way she'd been waiting to do for a week. And he looked back at her. "You're shorter than I expected," she said. He blinked. She held his gaze. "I'm kidding. Nervous. I don't usually get nervous." She put her hands flat on the table. "I've been rehearsing what I was going to say to you for 6 days, and I've already thrown all of it out." "It's fine," Marcus said. "It's not fine, actually," she said. "None of this is fine. I died in a parking garage, and a stranger brought me back and then walked away, and I need you to understand that I—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. The CEO composure flickered for a moment, just a moment, like a light in a wind. "I don't have the right words for this. I'm not sure the right words exist." Marcus looked at her across the table. He thought about gray faces on concrete floors. He thought about 4 seconds of nothing. He thought about Deshawn, asleep at the kitchen table, with a candle still burning. "You don't need words," he said. "You just need to keep showing up. That's all any of us can do." She looked at him for a long moment. Mavis appeared with a second mug of coffee without being asked, set it down in front of Katherine without ceremony, and was gone before either of them could say anything. And Marcus Webb and Katherine Ellison sat across from each other in a corner booth at Mavis's diner on 51st Street on a gray Saturday morning and began, very slowly, to have a real conversation. The kind that starts with one person being alive who shouldn't be, and another person who has been carrying the weight of knowing exactly what that means. The coffee at Mavis's was strong, the way it had always been strong, the kind that didn't apologize for itself. And Katherine Ellison drank it without asking for cream or sugar, which Marcus noticed and filed away without comment. They sat across from each other for the first minute without speaking. And it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who both understood that whatever came next needed to be said right, and that rushing it would ruin it. Katherine spoke first. "How are your hands?" Marcus looked down. The gauze was gone now, had been since Thursday, and the skin had healed to the pink, slightly too tight newness of recent scrapes. "Fine," he said. "They're fine." The paramedics report said you were at it for almost 5 minutes. She said it evenly, clinically, the way she probably said most things. But her eyes weren't clinical. On cold concrete, alone. The guard helped at the end, with the AED. Before that, yeah. He picked up his mug. It wasn't a decision. I want you to understand that. People keep framing it like I made this heroic choice. I didn't make a choice. I just didn't stop. That is the choice, Katherine said. Most people stop. He looked at her. I know. She set her mug down. I want to ask you something, and I need you to know that you can say no, and I will fully respect that, and we can talk about something else entirely. Go ahead. Why did you leave? She held his gaze. Not why you couldn't stay. I understand you had somewhere to be. I mean, why didn't you give your name? Why did you make yourself impossible to find? Marcus considered the question the way he considered all the real ones. By not answering immediately. By giving it the room it deserved. Because it wasn't about me, he said finally. It was about you. Whether you made it or not. That was the whole thing. That was the only thing that mattered in that moment. He paused. Once you made it, my part was done. There was nothing left for me in that garage. There was recognition. There was, I don't need recognition, he said. Not defensively, just as a statement of fact, the way he'd said it to Gerald, to Terry, to Deshawn. I need to know she made it. You made it. That's enough. Katherine was quiet for a moment. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Something between assessment and something more personal than that. Something she was working to keep contained. My father was a paramedic, she said. 22 years. South side of Detroit. She wrapped both hands around her mug. He used to say that the people who were best at the job were the ones who could care completely in the moment, and then let go completely after. He said holding on was what burned people out. She paused. He would have liked you. Is he still around? No, she said simply. 6 years ago. They looked at each other across the table. 6 years. The same 6 years. Marcus didn't say it out loud, and neither did she. But it sat between them like a third person at the table. The shared arithmetic of loss. My wife, he said. 6 years ago. Her heart stopped. Hospital hallway. Staff was... They got to her, but it took too long. He kept his voice level. He'd told this story enough times inside his own head that saying it out loud didn't unravel him anymore. It just sat there, heavy and real, and his. She didn't make it. Katherine didn't fill the pause with condolence. She just nodded, once, and waited. I bought a mannequin, he said. After. $40. Practiced in my living room for 2 weeks. He almost smiled. My son thought I was losing my mind. How old was he? 3. He did smile then, briefly. He kept trying to do it, too, on the couch cushions. Katherine looked at him steadily. So, when you found me, I knew what I was doing, he said. Yeah, because of her. Because of her. She exhaled, long, slow, the breath of someone releasing something they've been holding for days. Marcus. She said his name like she was confirming it was real, like the word itself needed to be said out loud to become true. I have spent a week trying to figure out what to say to you. I've written drafts, actual written drafts, which I don't do that. I run a company. I talk for a living. And every draft was wrong because every draft started from the premise that there was something I could give you that would equal what you gave me. And there isn't." She paused. "There isn't a number. There isn't a gesture. There's just the fact of it. You stayed. You gave me back everything I have." Marcus didn't look away from her. He let her say it. He understood that she needed to say it, that this was not just about him receiving thanks, but about her completing something, closing a circuit that had been open since she'd woken up in that hospital room, asking who had been there. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "I know you didn't do it for thanks." "No. I know you didn't do it because of who I am." "I didn't know who you were," he said. "I still don't, really. I know what the articles say." That seemed to land somewhere true for her. "What did they say?" "That you built a medical tech company from a business loan and 12 years of work. That you've been in a wheelchair since an accident in your 30s. That you're aggressive in negotiations and bad at delegating." He paused. "Terry, guy at my job, he looked you up. He's thorough." She laughed. It surprised her. He could see it surprise her. A real laugh, short but genuine, the kind that slips out before you've decided to let it. "That's a reasonably accurate summary," she said. "The bad at delegating part," he said, "I believe. The aggressive in negotiations part, you should also believe." Noted. The second cups of coffee came, again without being asked, because Mavis ran a diner the way some people ran small governments, with benevolent authority and perfect timing. The morning had warmed slightly. Through the window, the street was doing its Saturday business. A couple walking a dog, a man with a grocery bag, 2 kids on bikes moving fast. The ordinary world, continuing to be ordinary. "I want to do something for you," Katherine said. Her voice had shifted, still direct, but quieter now, less rehearsed. "Not as a transaction, not to balance anything, because it can't be balanced. Just because I can, and I want to." She paused. "I had my team pull some information. I'm not going to pretend I didn't, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve me performing ignorance." She met his eyes. "The medical debt, from your wife's hospitalization. It's still on your credit. $41,000 across 3 collection accounts." Marcus went still. He had known, intellectually, that she might have found this. He had known it was findable. He had sat with that knowledge in the back of his mind since Tuesday, and had decided it didn't change anything about meeting her. But hearing it said out loud, in the flat, specific number of it, $41,000, did something to the air in the room. He set his mug down. "Katherine, I know what you're going to say. I don't think you do. You're going to say you didn't do it for anything in return. I didn't. I know that." She leaned slightly forward. "I'm not offering it as payment. I'm not buying what you did. What you did can't be bought. I'm offering it because you are a man who has been carrying a debt you incurred trying to save someone you loved. And you have been carrying it for 6 years while raising your son alone on a factory wage. And I have the ability to make it go away, and it costs me—" She stopped, recalibrated. "It costs me nothing, meaningfully. It costs me nothing. And I want to." The silence stretched. Marcus looked at the table. He thought about the number. $41,000. He knew every account by number. The hospital, the ambulance, the specialist who'd been called in and had billed separately. He'd set up payment plans years ago that he still sent $60 a month toward. $60 that barely touched the interest. $60 that had come out of the budget every month for 6 years, with the quiet constancy of something that would simply always be there. He looked up at her. "My son doesn't know about it," he said. "He doesn't know the extent of it. He won't hear it from me. He might hear it from someone. If you're the one who—" I can do it through a legal channel that connects to nothing public. Her voice was steady. It disappears from the record. No announcement, no press release, no story. She paused. Unless you want one, which I don't think you do. I don't. Then it's between us. He looked at her for a long moment. He was trying to find the angle, the part of this that was about her, the part that served some purpose beyond what she was saying. He was a careful man. He'd learned to be careful. But what he found, looking at Katherine Ellison across a table in a diner on 51st Street, was not an angle. He found a woman who had been standing at the edge of something absolute and had been pulled back, and who was now sitting across from the man who had done the pulling, trying with every tool she had to do something meaningful with that. "I'm not comfortable with charity," he said. "I know. So think of it differently." She held his gaze. "You performed a service that required years of preparation, physical effort, and personal risk. The service saved a life that happens to have significant economic value, not because the life is worth more than any other life, but because that's the world we live in. In the world we live in, that service has value." She paused. "I'm paying a bill, Marcus. The bill is 6 years old, and it should never have existed in the first place. And I am paying it." It was, he thought, the most corporate and the most human thing he had ever heard said at the same time. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's fair." "I'm going to say yes eventually," he said, with a directness that seemed to surprise her slightly. "I want you to know that. But I need a few days to decide whether it changes how I feel about what I did. And if it doesn't change it, and I don't think it will, then I'll call Priya." "Okay," Katherine said. "Okay," he said. They sat for a moment in the comfortable aftermath of something honest having been said. Then Katherine said, "Can I ask you something else?" "Go ahead." "Deshaun." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "How is he handling all of this? The attention, the cameras at school?" "He's 9, Marcus said. "He handles things by not fully understanding them, and then asking about them later when they've had time to become manageable." A small smile. "He's better at that than I am, honestly." "He sounds like a good kid." "He is." The simplicity of the statement, the absolute uncomplicated certainty of it, sat in the air between them like something solid. "He's the best thing I've ever done." Katherine looked at him with an expression he recognized this time. He'd seen it before, on Sandra's face, on the face of the paramedic Rosa, on Terry's face in the locker room. The expression of someone looking at a thing and finding it more than they expected. "Can I tell you what my company does?" she said. "Not to pitch you, just because I think you should know." "Go ahead." "We build low-cost automated defibrillator systems for underserved communities. The whole premise is that AED access in lower-income neighborhoods is about 12% of what it is in wealthier ones. People die in cardiac events in those neighborhoods at significantly higher rates, not because the events are worse, because nobody has the equipment and nobody has the training." She paused. "We've deployed in 32 cities. The goal was 50 by next year." Marcus said nothing. "The night you saved my life," Katherine continued, "I was coming back from a board meeting about the next phase of the expansion. There was a funding dispute, a significant one, and I'd spent 3 hours arguing for the south side of Chicago specifically to be in the next rollout." She held his gaze. "And then I went to my car, and my heart stopped." The weight of that arranged itself in the room. "You kept alive," Marcus said slowly, "the person who was trying to put AEDs in neighborhoods like mine." "Yes." He absorbed this. "That's—" "I know." "That's something," he said. Yeah, she said. It is. They sat with that, with the strange, improbable geometry of it. A woman driving home from a meeting about saving lives, nearly losing hers. A man who had spent 6 years preparing for a moment he hoped would never come, finding himself in the right parking garage, on the right night. The AED that had shocked her heart back into rhythm, equipment that, in his neighborhood, in Deshawn's neighborhood, was still not reliably where it needed to be. The funding dispute, Marcus said. Is it resolved? Not yet, Katherine said. 2 board members think the expansion should prioritize markets with better revenue potential. Her voice was careful. They're not wrong from a financial perspective. They're just wrong from every other one. What do you need to win the argument? She looked at him, surprised, again. He was starting to enjoy that, the small breaks in her composure that happened when he did something she hadn't predicted. Data, primarily. Usage rates, survival rates, community impact metrics. And if you had someone who could talk about it, Marcus said. From experience, not a CEO, not a doctor, just a regular person who bought a $40 mannequin and practiced CPR in his living room because the equipment and the training weren't there when he needed them. He paused. Would that help? Katherine Ellison looked at Marcus Webb for a long moment. Yes, she said quietly. That would help a great deal. He nodded. Then maybe we have more to talk about. She reached across the table, not to shake his hand, not a formal gesture, just a movement. Her hand on the table, open, near his. I think we might, she said. From the counter, Mavis refilled the coffees for a 3rd time without being asked, moved away without a word, and said absolutely nothing. Because she had been running this diner for 30 years, and she knew the difference between a conversation that was ending and one that was just beginning. Outside, Chicago moved through its Saturday morning. Somewhere on the south side, in a 3rd-floor apartment, a 9-year-old boy was sleeping in past 9 for the first time since his birthday. One arm over the edge of the bed, perfectly, completely at peace. His father sat in a corner booth 4 miles away and began to understand that what had happened in a parking garage 11 days ago was not the end of something. It was the beginning. And the strange, looping, costly, necessary thread that connected all of it. A woman who had stopped breathing. A man who had refused to let her. A $40 mannequin. A missed birthday. 6 years of a debt that should never have existed. And a boardroom argument about which neighborhoods deserve to survive was not an accident. It was just life. Doing what life does. Arriving without warning. Asking everything. And waiting to see who turns back. Marcus picked up his coffee. He thought about Deshawn's question. The one about the octopus with 3 hearts. Maybe one's for backup. He drank, and the morning continued. The debt was cleared on a Tuesday. Marcus didn't watch it happen. He didn't sit at his computer refreshing the screen or call the collection agencies to confirm. He just went to work, came home, made dinner, and that evening received a single text from a number he'd saved as Priya, Bantara, that said, "It's done. All 3 accounts. No public record." And then, 20 seconds later, a second text in a different style, less formal, clearly not Priya, that said, "Thank you for letting me do that. K." He set the phone down on the kitchen counter. He stood there for a minute. Just stood there, in his kitchen, with the stove still warm, and Deshawn's backpack on the floor by the door where it always landed, and the smell of the rice he'd made still in the air. He tried to feel something clean and simple about it. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. But what he felt was more complicated than that. $41,000. Gone. 6 years of $60 payments that had never made a dent. Gone. The weight of it. The specific low-grade weight of a debt that never leaves your credit, never leaves your awareness, sits in the back of every financial decision you make for half a decade. Just gone. Like it had never been there. He thought about Nia. He thought about the hospital bill arriving 3 weeks after her funeral. The way it had felt like a second blow, a bureaucratic cruelty that no one had intended, and that had landed anyway. He thought about signing the payment plan with a hand that had still been numb, still hadn't fully understood that she wasn't coming back. He thought, she would have hated that that bill existed. She would have been furious on his behalf for 6 years. He almost smiled. "Dad," Deshawn was in the doorway of the kitchen. "Is dinner ready?" "Yeah," Marcus said, and turned back to the stove. "Get your plate." He did not tell Deshawn about the debt that night. He had decided he would tell him someday, when Deshawn was old enough to understand the full shape of it, the whole thing. Nia, and the hospital, and the mannequin, and the parking garage, and the woman in the wheelchair, and the diner on 51st, and all of it together as one continuous thread. He would tell him all of it. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight there was rice, and there was Deshawn's running commentary on something that had happened at school, involving a substitute teacher and a misunderstanding about the water fountain. And Marcus listened to every word of it, and it was enough. He called Katherine the following Saturday. Not Priya, Katherine directly, on the number she'd written on the back of a Mavis's receipt during their second meeting, 3 days after the first one, when she'd come back with 2 questions she'd forgotten to ask, and he'd happened to be there because Mavis's was the kind of place you returned to without entirely meaning to. She answered on the second ring. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "I said I would." "People say things." "I don't," he said. "Not usually." He paused. "The board meeting. When is it?" 3 weeks? Why?" "Because I've been thinking about what you said, about the data and the survival rates and all of it." He pulled out the notepad he'd been writing on for the last 4 days, a yellow legal pad, the kind he used at work, now covered in his own handwriting. Notes, questions, numbers he'd looked up on his phone after Deshawn went to bed. AED placement statistics, cardiac survival rates by zip code, the specific disparity between the neighborhood he lived in and the neighborhoods 8 miles north. "And I think you need more than one person's story. I think you need a room full of them." Silence on the line. Then, "What are you suggesting?" "A meeting," he said. "Southside Community Center, the one on 63rd. Ms. Tanner runs it. I know her from Deshawn's school. 2 weeks before your board meeting. Open to anyone who wants to talk about what it's like to need emergency care in a neighborhood where the equipment isn't there." He paused. "I'll put the word out. You come and listen. Bring whoever you need to bring. And then you take what you hear into that boardroom and you put it on the table." Another silence. Longer. He could hear her breathing, which he'd come to understand was what Katherine Ellison did when she was thinking seriously. She went quiet and breathed, and the silence had a particular texture to it, like something being assembled. "You'd organize this yourself?" she said. "I've got time," he said, which was not entirely true, but some things you make time for. "Marcus," her voice had the quality it got when she was trying to say something direct, without it sounding like more than it was. "You know that if you do this, if you walk into that community center and put your name to this, the story comes back. The cameras come back. You can't—" "I know," he said. "You've spent 3 weeks avoiding exactly—" "I know what I've been doing," he said. "I've been thinking about what's worth coming out for." He looked at the legal pad. This is worth it." She was quiet again. Then, "Why?" He thought about the right answer. He thought about the mannequin and the $40 Amazon order, and the library certification course, and the 2 weeks of practice that his son had turned into a game. He thought about all the people in his neighborhood who hadn't done any of that. Not because they didn't care, but because nobody had ever told them it mattered. Nobody had ever put the information in their hands. Nobody had ever said, "This is how you keep someone alive, and someday you might need to know it." "Because Nia died in a hospital hallway, and nobody moved fast enough," he said. "And I spent 6 years being angry about that. And then I found out that the anger had a use." He paused. If one person in that parking garage had known CPR, anyone, the first bystander who stopped, she might have had a better chance. Just one person, knowing one thing. He looked out the window. "There are a lot of parking garages, Katherine. A lot of hospital hallways. And the people who end up on the floor in them, they're mostly from neighborhoods where nobody thought to put the box on the wall or teach the class at the library." She didn't say anything for a moment. "I'll be there," she said. "Whatever night you set." "Wednesday the 14th, he said. 7 o'clock. "I'll be there at 6:55. "Good," he said. And before she could respond, he added, "Bring Priya. She takes good notes." He heard something that might have been a laugh. "She'll appreciate you saying that." "I'll let you tell her," Marcus said, and hung up. The community center on 63rd held 40 people comfortably, and 60 if you were willing to fold chairs into the aisles. On Wednesday the 14th, Ms. Tanner counted 83. They came because Marcus had asked them. Not through social media, he still didn't have any, but the old way, the way that still worked on the South Side if you knew the right people, and the right people knew everyone else. He talked to Ms. Tanner, who talked to the pastor at Cornerstone Baptist, who mentioned it on Sunday. He talked to the librarian at the branch on Halsted, who ran the after-school program, who sent an email to her list. He talked to Terry, who told approximately everyone he had ever met within 24 hours, because Terry was Terry. He talked to Sandra, who brought 4 women from her building, and a man named Clifford who had lost his brother to a cardiac event 3 years ago, and had, he told Marcus quietly before the meeting started, never told anyone the full story before. He talked to Deshawn, who listened with the focused seriousness of a boy who understood that something important was happening, even if he didn't have all the edges of it yet. "Can I come?" Deshawn asked. Marcus thought about it. "Yeah," he said. "You can come." Deshawn sat in the front row beside Sandra and did not fidget once, which was unprecedented in Marcus's experience of his son in public settings. Katherine came with Priya and a man Marcus hadn't met, mid-50s, silver-haired, the air of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. She introduced him as Dr. Elliot Sands, board member, Dantara Solutions. She said it neutrally, without editorializing. But Marcus caught the slight emphasis on board member and understood what she was telling him. She had brought the argument into the room. Dr. Sands shook Marcus's hand. His grip was firm in the way people's grips are when they want you to know they take you seriously. "Mr. Webb, I've heard a great deal about you. Most of it's probably wrong," Marcus said pleasantly, and moved on. The meeting ran 2 hours and 40 minutes. Marcus opened it the way he'd decided he would, plainly, without preamble, without drama. He stood at the front of the room and said, "My name is Marcus Webb. I live 6 blocks from here. My wife died 6 years ago, and I've been learning CPR in my living room ever since, because I didn't want to be helpless again. 3 weeks ago, I found a woman in a parking garage who wasn't breathing, and I kept her alive until the paramedics came, because I knew what to do. He paused. Most people in this room probably don't know CPR. That's not a criticism. Nobody taught you. Nobody put the equipment where you could reach it. Tonight, I want to hear what that's been like for people. And I want the right people to be in the room when we talk about it. Then he sat down, and the room talked. Clifford talked about his brother, the 12 minutes it took EMS to arrive, the dispatcher who'd kept him on the phone, the instructions he'd been given that he hadn't known how to follow because he'd never practiced them on anything, not even a pillow. His voice broke once, in the middle, and he stopped and breathed and kept going. A woman named Diane talked about her mother 4 years ago in their front hallway. She'd called 911 and stood there because she simply did not know what else to do. Her mother had survived, barely, with damage that hadn't fully healed. "If I'd known," she said, "even just the basics, if someone had taken 45 minutes in a room like this and taught me, it might have been different." A retired postal worker named Harold talked about the AED at his church, donated 3 years ago by a congregation member, still in its original packaging, still in the storage room, because nobody had shown them how to use it. A young woman, couldn't have been more than 25, talked about her apartment building, 12 units, not a single person trained in first aid. "We've got a smoke detector on every floor," she said. "We don't have anything for a heart attack." Marcus listened to all of it. He watched Dr. Sands listen to all of it. Watched the man's face move through careful professional neutrality, and then through something less managed, something that arrived in stages as the room kept talking, as the stories accumulated into a single weight. Near the end, Katherine spoke. She didn't try to make a speech. She just said, simply and directly, that she had been the woman in the parking garage. That she had been someone who had built her career around exactly this problem: AED access, CPR training, equitable emergency care infrastructure. And that she had almost died 40 feet from a handicapped parking spot in a city that considered itself a leader in public health. That the man who had saved her had known what to do because he had taught himself, alone, in his living room. Because the formal systems had failed him when he needed them most. She said, "We have funding. We have technology. What we sometimes lack is the will to put it where it's needed instead of where it's profitable. I'm asking my board to fix that. Tonight you've given me what I need to make that argument." The room was quiet when she finished. Then Harold, the retired postal worker, raised his hand. "The AED in the storage room," he said. "Can someone teach us how to use it?" Marcus stood up. "I can," he said. "Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. I'll come to you." Harold nodded. "I'll make coffee." "I'll bring the mannequin," Marcus said. Deshaun, from the front row, turned to look at his father with an expression Marcus hadn't seen on his face before. Something beyond pride. Something more specific than that. The look of a boy who was seeing his father whole, maybe for the first time. Not just as the man who made pancakes and drove the truck with a cracked taillight and worked the long shifts and came home tired, but as something larger, something that had always been there in the fabric of the man that was now visible in the light. Marcus held his son's gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at the room and said, "Who else?" The Vantara board voted 3 weeks later. The expansion passed. Southside Chicago in the first phase. 12 additional cities within 18 months. A new community training initiative. Free CPR certification, partnered with local libraries and community centers. Funded as a parallel program to the equipment rollout. Katherine called Marcus when it was done. It was a Thursday evening. He was in the kitchen. He could hear Deshaun in the other room doing homework and complaining about long division. "It passed," she said. "I know," he said. "How do you know?" "Priya texted me." A pause. "She was not supposed to do that." She did it anyway, Marcus said. She takes good notes and she texts fast. You should give her a raise. Katherine laughed. The real one, not the polite professional version, the one that came out when she was caught off guard. I'll consider it. Her voice settled into something quieter. Marcus, thank you. For the meeting, for the testimony, for all of it. I didn't do it for you, he said. I want you to understand that. I know. I did it because Harold had an AED in a box in a storage room for 3 years. I did it because Diane's mother almost died in a hallway. I did it because... He stopped. Because if my neighborhood had what the North Side has, Nia might still be here. I'll never know that for certain, but she might be. He was quiet for a moment. So I'm going to do what I can with what I know. That's all. Katherine was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was level but careful, the way it got when she was choosing words very precisely. For what it's worth, she said, Nia raised a man who knows how to stay. That's not nothing. That's not a small thing. Marcus stood in his kitchen with the phone against his ear and said nothing for a moment. No, he said finally. It's not. On a Saturday in February, 4 months after a cold November night in a parking garage, Marcus Webb stood in the fellowship hall of Cornerstone Baptist Church on the south side of Chicago, with a CPR mannequin on a folding table in front of him, and 22 people seated in metal chairs, looking at him with a particular attentiveness of people who have decided they want to know something important. There were older men, Harold's age, the age of men who had watched too many people leave too fast. There were young women with kids on their laps, who had come because the child care co-op 2 doors down had put up a flyer. There were teenagers from the after-school program, 2 of them, who had been bribed with the promise of community service hours, and who were now, Marcus noted, paying closer attention than most of the adults. Deshawn was there too, sitting in the back, officially too young to certify, but present because Marcus had decided his son was going to learn this, if it was the last thing he taught him. Marcus looked at the room. He looked at the mannequin on the table. He thought, briefly, about the living room 6 years ago, the $40 Amazon order, and the pine floor, and Deshawn waddling over at age 3 to see what his father was doing. He thought about the parking garage. He thought about counting out loud in the dark. He thought about all the parking garages, all the hallways, all the 47-second videos of strangers on their knees on cold concrete that nobody should have to film, that wouldn't have to be filmed if the knowledge was already in the room. Okay, he said. Here's what we're going to do. This is going to take about 2 hours. You're going to feel awkward about half of it, and that's normal. By the time you leave today, you're going to know what to do if someone's heart stops in front of you. He paused. You're not going to be a paramedic. You're not going to be a doctor. You're just going to know the thing. And knowing the thing is the difference. He looked at the room. Somebody in your life may need this. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But someday, in some ordinary place, a parking garage, a front hallway, a church fellowship hall. Someone is going to need somebody to stay. He put his hands together, heel to heel, the way you do before you start. So let's make sure one of you knows how. The room leaned forward. He began. Outside, February Chicago did what it always did. Cold and indifferent and enormous. The lake somewhere beyond the buildings. The city spread out in every direction without apology. Inside, a man who had driven home and made pancakes and gone to work and kept his head down and carried a debt and loved his son and learned a thing in his living room that nobody had asked him to learn, was standing in front of 22 people and teaching them to stay. No cameras, no reporters, no headline. Just the knowledge, moving from one pair of hands to the next. Deshaun Webb watched his father from the back of the room, with his hands in his lap and his eyes completely steady, and he was already memorizing every word. Because he was his mother's son and his father's son, and he understood, in the way that some children understand things before they have the language for them, that what was happening in this room on a February Saturday was not ordinary. It was not ordinary at all. It was the quiet work of a man who had decided, somewhere in the wreckage of the worst night of his life, that the right response to loss was not to close off, but to prepare, to practice, to show up, to stay. And now the knowledge lived in 22 more people, and in 2 weeks it would live in 12 more, and Harold would teach his congregation, and one of the teenagers in the back row would teach her younger sister, and the thing would keep moving the way real things move, not in headlines and viral videos and national news segments, but in rooms and hands, and the specific kind of courage that doesn't look like courage at all, because it looks like someone just doing what needs to be done. Somewhere across the city, a woman in a wheelchair was walking into a boardroom to fight for this neighborhood, and the one after it, and the one after that. She was fighting with data, and with survival statistics, and with the memory of a man counting out loud in the dark. Somewhere on the south side, Sandra was upstairs, making something that smelled good enough to share. The truck with the cracked taillight was parked on the street. The apartment on the 3rd floor was unlocked because Marcus trusted his building, his block, his people. And in a fellowship hall that smelled like old coffee and folding chairs, Marcus Webb's hands found the mannequin's chest, and he said, clearly and without hesitation, the same way he'd said it alone in a parking garage at 11:14 at night in November, the same way he'd said it in his living room 6 years ago with his 3-year-old watching from the couch. Like this: count out loud, don't stop. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had only ever wanted to know what to do, and to do it. That was the whole story. That was all of it. And it was enough.